I am live. I'm reading Reshad Feild's book, The Invisible Way, A Time to Love, A Time to Die. I am now in chapter 7. He has been in Turkey and he is back in England. He met Elizabeth, and at Elizabeth's he met Noor. We're continuing. This was published in 1979. Let's go to Stonehenge on the way, Noor said. We could drive overnight and be ready to see the sun come up. After all the tension, we found ourselves slightly delirious and happy. It was as though permission had been given and we could go on our way in freedom. We were sitting in the car outside Elizabeth's house. First we must go back to my flat, I said. I have to pack a suitcase and leave a forwarding address with the caretaker. We'll have dinner and then we can go. It was just turning dusk and the street lamps were switched on. People were already returning home. They looked so tired. We both felt sorry and wanted to shout out to them the beauty of life that we felt, but I doubt if they would have heard. Perhaps at that moment their world was not a world to reason the whys and wherefores of things. Yet it was a world that was just as real for them as our world was for us. What is real for anyone is what one sees with the outer or the inner eye. We become what we behold, Blake wrote. I realized that night that the extraordinary thing about our meeting was the complete lack of reserve we both felt. It was our first dinner together, at least the first time that we had eaten alone, and yet there was such a harmony between us, and it was as though the years since we had first met simply did not exist. We shared stories over the Greek meal Noor had prepared. We laughed, listened to music, were silent. Something about the inevitability of the situation held us continuously. The sensations and feelings were so strong that only the moment existed. Although I had come from a family background that had been particularly interested in the Druid and Celtic legends, and in the ancient history of the British Isles, I had only been to Stonehenge once before, and that was many years earlier to witness a ceremony held by the Druids. Each year they gathered together from many parts of England, Scotland and Wales to celebrate the summer solstice within the circle of standing stones. On this one day in the year the sun breaks over what is called the Heelstone, and thousands of people come for the event. I had much preferred the idea of going quietly, however, when one could sit alone and ponder the meaning of Stonehenge and of the other stone circles that are found throughout Europe. Noor and I had driven from London overnight. We had planned the journey to arrive just before sunrise. We were early, for it was still dark as we parked the car. The air was chilly, most of the stars had gone, and everything was filled with an air of expectancy. You could feel the great mass of the earth turning slowly towards the light of the sun. Neither of us spoke. As we sensed the first glimmerings of dawn, we walked into the centre of the circle formed by the stones. In the darkness they seemed like great sentinels, their massive shapes standing out against the lightening sky. I was glad to have someone with me, and I knew that Noor felt the same way. It was very close to dawn. A bank of clouds picked up the reflection of the sun before we could see it, and the sky turned pink and then red. I took her hand. Quite suddenly it seemed the sun moved up over the horizon just south of the Heelstone. The great monoliths that only a few minutes before had seemed so dark and brooding were now grey and still in the morning light. I realized then that we were not alone. In the darkness I had not noticed there were other people standing singly or in small groups around the circle. There was a deep silence. I saw one young man with his arms raised high above his head in salute. A young woman sat in meditation, and two older people stood close together in the shadow of one of the stones. It was as though everyone in some way fitted into the harmony of the moment. The realization of the inner connectedness of all life was so strong that it was as though we were everywhere at once, and yet totally awake to the present. The land upon which we stood, and the myriad of things, both visible and invisible, that made up the subtle structure of the universe. Everything was so quiet. Everything seemed sacred. You cannot pick a flower without the troubling of a star, wrote a great English mystic. Nor had her arm around my shoulders. It's a taste of something very real, she murmured. Elizabeth used to talk so much about what she called the real world, and how it only with the inner senses that this can be understood. What we normally see is merely a world of appearances. Our food here is the food of comparison. But in the real world there is no comparison, only continuous creation, in each moment from the perfect pattern, or matrix containing infinite possibilities of manifestation. Thus the shape of the egg contains within itself all of the kingdom. Animal, mineral, vegetable, and so on. There was a time when I could see all these things, but I was not able to express myself. She was talking very quietly. To the outer world I was mad. They said that I had had a mental breakdown, but actually I never thought it was so. It was just that I couldn't explain what I saw. Do you remember when I couldn't speak much, I used to carry the ball of blue wool with me everywhere? The wool represented for me the threads that interlink all life. It was only my own Ariadne's thread and something that I could hold on to, tracing back my own origin and the origin of all creatures. But you do see how everything is interconnected? I have had a sense of it, I answered, but I cannot really explain it any better than you could at that time. All I know is that there is something that links us all in a pattern, and it is we human beings who stand at each point of the pattern. It is as though these massive stones represent, in physical form, a timeless state that exists in each one of us, both anchoring something into the earth and acting as transformers of subtle energies. The sun had now risen, and we sat on one of the fallen stones as everyone else moved away from the circle. The only sound was a lark soaring above the plain. You know what I think it is all about, Noor said, finally. I believe that these interconnecting lines are not to do with magnetism alone, as though some people assume that more to do with electromagnetism. In China they are called dragon lines, although here they are known as ley lines. But whatever name these lines are known, it is through them that we are subtly connected in this world. The lines are sleeping, dormant, needing to be recognized. It is like women who also need to be recognized. But it is as though love alone that they come alive. But it is through love alone that they come alive, and it is through love that we are able to go beyond the boundaries of personality and greed and sorrow, to enter the world of reality. That is what I think, she said excitedly. And that is why we are here, you and I. We are here because of the love that has been awakened within us. So we can experience a little of what it is all about. I felt a strange sense of excitement. Something had changed. Energy took on a new meaning, and looking back on that moment, I suppose it could be said that love had awakened a degree of responsibility that I could not immediately face. The words of the poem by Kathleen Raine came into my mind. Because I love, there is an invisible way across the sky. Birds travel that way, the sun and moon, and all the stars travel that path by night. Because I love, there's a river flowing all night long. Because I love, all night the river flows into my sleep. 10,000 living things are sleeping in my arms, and sleeping, wake, and flowing are at rest. It began to rain, and we walked slowly back to the car to continue our journey. We had no definite plans where to stay, but there were many small hotels and pubs to be found in that area of England. Noor seemed excited. She was in love with everything, including the rain, and had opened the window to hold her arm out so that both she and the inside of the car were getting soaked. Despite everything, I found myself getting agitated. "Oh, for heaven's sake, now, Noor, close the window." "Why? Don't be so stuffy. You're too serious. You keep chasing after things that come to you if you'd let them." "What's that got to do with shutting the window and keeping the car dry?" "It's got everything to do with it," she said, laughing. "You know by now, don't you, that if you walk in the rain, you get less wet than if you run in it. It's all to do with resistance." "But we are driving in the car, Noor, not walking." I reached a point of total exasperation and finally stopped near a small wood. I refused to drive on until she shut the window. The situation was ridiculous and embarrassing. Suddenly, almost for no reason, we were in the middle of a stupid row. "I thought you said it would be nice to walk in the rain and make love in front of an open fire," she said. "Well, now, here's all the rain, and you won't even have the window open. Come on, let's go." "That's ridiculous, Noor. There is no open fire. It's cold. And we're right in the middle of nowhere. And anyway, I haven't got a coat." "What's got a coat got to do with it?" She opened the door, pulling my arm. "You go for a walk if you want to. I'll wait for you here." "But there's no point in that," she said, shutting the door again. But this time the car was really wet, since the wind had driven the rain in through the open door. Noor sat in the passenger seat and stared out of the window, which was by now completely steamed up. We were at an impasse. "All right," I said, "let's go for a walk then. We're both soaked anyway." I opened the driver's door and started to get out. "It's too late," she said. "If you want to love a woman, you have to learn to be spontaneous. You theorize and theorize, but when it comes to the point, you don't move. Why can't you be natural?" "I am natural, damn it," I said, "but what the hell's the point of getting wet when there is nowhere to dry off? It's just plain silly." "You can't get wet," she said, flinging her jersey at me. "See if you can keep dry in this." Opening the door, she ran out into the rain. There was a 5-barred gate by the side of the road. I watched her slip through it and disappear into the wood. I couldn't see anything from the inside of the car and had to take my handkerchief to clean a portion of the windscreen. That didn't work either, so I opened the side window and shouted after her. There was no answer, just the sound of rain on the car roof and the water dripping off the trees. I sat there for a while. Let her get wet, I thought. I'll wait. But it didn't work that way. She had not come back. I waited and waited. Finally, with the rain still coming down, I got out of the car, climbed over the gate and walked up the path through the wood. But there was no sign of Noor. I looked for an indication that she had come that way, but the path was sodden with water and there were no tracks. I called out, but there was no answer. Finally, I saw an opening in the trees. Soaked through and out of breath, I reached the end of the wood. A 5-acre field stretched out in front of me. A few sheep were huddled together in the shelter of the trees by the fence. But there was still no sign of Noor. "Noor!" I shouted. "Noor!" At that moment there was the sound of a branch cracking and leaves hit me on the back of the head. Turning around to ward them off, I saw her. For a split second I wondered if she'd gone over the top again. She was standing behind me on the pathway with a long sprig of leaves in her hand. Her hair was hanging down like rat tails. Her dress was almost transparent. from the rain. She stood, her feet apart, her eyes laughing, and her head and her back to the path. "Well," she challenged me. We found a pub, just back from the road, miles from anywhere. We must have looked pretty strange, soaked and carrying one small suitcase as we walked through the door. A young girl greeted us when we rang the bell, but she said that she would have to find her mum when we asked if there was a room available. We were left in the hall, our wet clothes dripping. Noor had her arm around me. "They were spontaneous in the old days," she said, grinning. They didn't have to think so much. They didn't have so much to think about. The landlady soon appeared from the back of the house. She looked us up and down very slowly with a great suspicion. "So you want a room then?" she asked, more as a statement than a question. "Would it be for more than one night?" "It's just for one night. We were on our way to Wales, but we got delayed, and as you can see, we are very wet and muddy. We would really like a room and a hot bath." She went over to the desk and spent an age checking on the rooms, occasionally looking up to stare at us. Once again, I guessed that there was no one else staying. "I have one room left," she said finally, "but dinner is included in the price. You will be wanting supper, won't you?" When we said we would love to have supper, she seemed relieved and eventually wrote our names down in the register. "Mind your heads," she said as she led us upstairs. "The beams are very low and people often bump their head." She led us to a room at the end of the corridor, turning on the electric fire, and informed us that dinner would be ready at 7 o'clock. "I'll make a break here and continue soonest."